Welcome to the podcast. This is the Hemp.com podcast. I'm your host, Josh Davis. Today we're going to be talking about cars, more specifically, what they're actually made out of. And I'm sure, as you guessed, hemp will be a number one topic of discussion. I've got a very special guest today, Nathan James Armstrong. He is the director and president of Motive Industries. Nathan's got 16 years or over 16 years of transportation design engineering experience in both the aerospace and automotive sectors. Prior to establishing Motive in 2004, Nathan worked for Boeing and Arrowhead Products on the International Space Station, the Delta rockets, and Joint Strike Fighter programs. In 1996, Nathan moved to the automotive engineering area, working for Metal Crafters and the ARIA Group in Southern California, where he managed the engineering and construction of a vast array of vehicle projects, including over 30 production vehicles, over 100 composite vehicles, and close to 1,000 clay models, interior models, and scale models. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hello.
How you doing today?
Doing good. How you doing?
Good. First question I have for you. Do you know how awesome your job is?
It's pretty good.
I mean, it's like... Some people are like, oh, I want to grow up and be this and be this. I mean, you're the guy who, like, you got to take your childhood, you making little models and stuff, and bring it into the adult world and make money off of it. It's amazing.
We do essentially get to make toys, yes. But we also do encourage a lot of other people to get into this industry, so we're trying to grow it as quickly as we can too, and have other people be able to enjoy this experience as well. So
fantastic. So tell me a little bit, the reason why I had you on the podcast was because I read an article recently on one of your newest cars, and I don't know if you call it a concept car or if it's a production model, if it's actually going to be out there on the road. But why is this particular car, why should we be paying attention to it?
The Kestrel was done for a few reasons. The main one was to prove a Canadian competency and to kind of show the world that we have the technical resources and the ability and the intellect to do something that's not just on par with what everybody else is doing, but also try and exceed kind of global design standards on where the automotive industry is today. So really trying to push the barrier forward. We're trying to prove that alternative materials like hemp, like electric-based vehicles, can actually be put into the mainstream and be successful. And also, again, as an education outreach, to try and pull as many schools and universities into this program as we can to try and educate the youth and the engineering youth on this type of build and to encourage this into the future. So that's really the main reason. It's also done, obviously, to support Canadian industry, so we have many partners in the program. The big part for us is the biocomposite body, which is hemp-based, and that is coming from a considerable research program undertaken by the Alberta Research Council on biomaterials and the validity of biomaterials and the impact they'll make to the agricultural industry. And this is the first product demonstration of that research that was done over the last 5 years by the council here. So we're very excited about that aspect too.
So Canada always just sort of gets the butt of the joke whenever, people make fun of, Canada, what's going on up there. But obviously you have a lot of things going on, especially in the technological world. And for me, at least, being a hemp advocate, I always look to Canada sort of to lead the way, because you guys up there, obviously, how can I put it, don't have your heads up your asses like we do down here, as far as, what hemp can do for technology. We're a little bit more ignorant of it down in the States here, unfortunately. Right now, like if I'm driving down the road and I see a car, that car body is, I'm assuming it's metal, or have plastic in it. What am I seeing right here, and how is what you're doing different?
Part of the approach for using composite materials essentially is a low cost of entry. Typically, an automaker will spend between $500 and $700 million tooling a steel body for a vehicle. If you go composite, we're down below $5 million for the tooling. So it's a much more cost-effective way to get into the market. And, of course, if you don't have the cost to develop the vehicle, then you don't have to amortize as much cost when you sell the vehicle. So it kind of changes the business model around how many you have to sell and how much you can sell them for. So that's a big advantage. From an environmental standpoint, obviously steel, there's a lot of processing that goes into making steel, all the way from mining to furnaces, to massive amounts of energy going into actually making the sheet steel. And then the processing of the sheet steel itself takes another huge amount of energy to run the machines to obviously stamp the steel. Then you got the spot welders to weld it together. So the amount of resources that are used to produce a steel-bodied vehicle is extraordinary. Again, if we look at the fiber-reinforced plastics, we're looking at very, very cheap tooling, very efficient to manufacture. We've got a vacuum pump and a heater, and that's it. And there's no energy used throughout the manufacturing. Essentially, again, it's a lot of bonding and riveting, and not a lot of energy use. So for environmental cradle-to-grave type analysis, a composite vehicle will be drastically more efficient and more environmentally friendly than a steel-bodied vehicle. So that's a big one.
Yeah. Well, take me through the process. I've got a bunch of questions about this, and there's not one in any particular order. So take me from the field to the car.
Well, it's an interesting one because, I mean, as I think a lot of people know, hemp is non-GMO. All hemp is non-GMO, and there's no pesticides needed. So right from the field, it's a very friendly crop to grow. The pilot plot that they have in Alberta here is run by the Alberta Agriculture on a joint venture with the Alberta Research Council. And they've been really working on how much hemp do you have to plant per square meter to get maximum fiber yield, what type of water conditions do you have to have. So a lot of research on the front end to maximize the fiber output. And that was quite interesting to see because up until this point, there hasn't really been too much value placed around the fiber of the plant. It's always been around the seed or the oil. But now we're looking at the fiber and how can we maximize the fiber strength and the fiber yield. So that's really the first step. Once you have that figured out and you've got the optimum plant, and they've got that now, they've been working with different strains, and they've got a really, really good strain of a plant that gives them a very high fiber yield. In the field, that is cut and chopped in the field into 6-inch lengths and stripped of the leaves. So that's all done in the field. And then those stalks are bundled up into bales, so your regular big round bale that you see. That big bale then goes to a processing machine that is put on a conveyor belt that goes into a first machine. And the equipment we have here is built by a Swedish company. And there's a big razor blade that comes down and chops the bale into smaller pieces. And that then goes through a series of combs and rollers and needle punch machines to essentially at the end, what comes out is a mat. And it kind of looks like stiff cardboard. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. And it's essentially, it's a random placement of the fibers at a uniform thickness and a uniform surface finish. So we can then take that mat, put it into the molds, infuse the resin, and make the parts. So it's essentially, it's that simple.
And so, what do you add to the hemp itself to get it to be so sturdy? What other elements do you put in there?
Well, nothing really. I mean, the hemp in of itself is a very, very strong fiber. And in fact, what we're finding is that now we're kind of into the second and third generations of studies that we're equal, if not besting, fiberglass in every area. So the fiber itself is incredibly strong. The only fiber that's stronger, I think, is coconut. But hemp is a fantastic fiber to work with. Very surprising in the results that we get. We are still early stages in the research as far as maximizing and optimizing the strength we can get from the fiber. So there's groups looking at an additive process that would actually increase the surface area of the fiber to allow the resin to bond better. So that's kind of down the road a little ways. And then, of course, alignment of the fibers and how you actually get the fibers to give you maximum strength. But what's interesting about this part of the conversation is that we're taking an agricultural crop and trying to turn it into an engineered product. So it's a very interesting transition between the field and the engineering studio, where in the engineering world you're used to working with materials that you understand the properties of, but when you're working with a plant, you have to accept the variances that you get in the plant. So we're also working with how do we establish a baseline quality for the strength of the fiber that we know we can work with going forward. So
interesting. So they're actually testing different strains of different types of hemp to see which one gives you the strongest fiber.
Yeah. And in fact, the one that I think they settled on again came from Europe, came from Sweden, I believe.
Right.
So I think in Europe there's lots of this kind of work going on, and lots of people doing this same type of research. So I think they're well down the track as well.
And as always, for people who are just tuning in, when we talk about industrial hemp, we're talking about hemp that has usually 0.3% or less THC in it. So this is not marijuana. This is a different type of cannabis altogether. What about the strength of this material and the weight of the material compared to everyday material that we use now? The closest comparison is fiberglass. So if you take your shower tub or your hot tub or your bathtub or your small boat or your jet ski, that's all going to be chopper gun fiberglass. So really that's our initial market for the material.
and if we compare it to fiberglass in that respect, we're looking at about 20% lighter, and currently we're about 10% less expensive. But as fiberglass goes up in price and as the hemp comes down in price because of supply chain being built and developed, we expect to see the price difference to change even more, and will probably be half the price of fiberglass within 5 to 10 years. So that's probably the most direct comparison we have. There's another layer that we can do with the material actually, which is to split the fiber down almost to a nano-size fiber, and that nano-size fiber can actually be added to any type of plastic. So that's the kind of the other side of this coin, is not using the long fibers, which are 2 to 3 inches long. We're actually now down to a nano cellulose fiber, and that can be added to anything. It can be added to your iPhone housing or to your laptop housing. It makes it much, much stiffer. So that's another application we're looking at for more mainstream type products.
Interesting. So your company is actually looking not just into the automotive, but into all of these other aspects.
Well, I think it's important to encourage the development of these other aspects. I think if we're finding results that could benefit other industries, then we try and get that information out there so that other people can start working with that other side of things. So, yeah, I think it's to the benefit of all to work on building a supply chain. That's really the problem at the minute, is that the growers aren't feeding into a supply chain, an industrial supply chain, and the supply chain can't exist because the growers aren't putting the plant in. So it's a kind of a chicken and an egg equation. But by encouraging different areas to look at the using the material, then we can encourage the supply chain to grow in a much quicker way. So
is that because they can actually get more money for other different types of crops, or they don't know about it? It's a brand new thing. You know, really, me looking at using the fiber as a value crop is a brand new thing. Mm-hmm. Literally last year, I sat with a bunch of farmers, and they were talking about flax and about the strength of the flax fiber. And it was the first time in 3 generations of farming that any one of them had actually talked about the fiber and the strength of the fiber and how to make the fiber stronger. So it's a brand new emerging industry. But as we look at the market potential for biomaterials, it is absolutely enormous, and could replace synthetic fibers and synthetic materials overnight. And we're really underutilizing about 90% of the biomass on Earth currently. So there's plenty of material out there to use. Obviously, as everybody listening to this knows, hemp grows at an amazing rate and can yield. It's about 100 cars per acre per year. That's our kind of our guideline for the cars. 100 cars per acre per year.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. But the funny thing to me, this is very humorous, hearing that you talk about it's an emerging technology. It's a new, it's sort of a new crop. Hemp has been around forever, and if you look back, minus the past 60 years, I'd say, there were wars fought for hemp, and it was the basis of entire navies. And it seems like we had this sort of collective amnesia through the 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, and we're just now getting back to it, which is, I think it's beautiful.
It's perfect timing, yeah. And in fact, if you look back historically again, I think Washington and Jefferson were both hemp farmers, and I think it was Jefferson that actually invented the original decodification machine for separating the fiber from the head of the plant, which is the center, the foamy center. And he considered it such an important invention that he refused to patent it. He thought everybody should have access to this machine. So you're absolutely right. Historically, there's an amazing amount of stuff that's been forgotten. Henry Ford in 1941, we all know about his hemp car that he built, and the very first Model T prototype was made out of hemp as well, and actually ran on hemp oil.
Interesting.
So,
I just posted a little teeny article on that. I went on the Henry Ford website, and they refer to it as the soybean car. And I don't know. I'm looking into that, wondering. I wonder if they're trying to do, if they're trying to be PC.
It's exactly what it is. Again, the whole hemp issue is a bit of a hot potato because of the association with marijuana. But as we found this year when we had the press release went out in the Kestrel, and it got dubbed the cannabis car, we did have some pushback from some of the partners saying, do we really want to be aligned with this? But it's just a matter of education. I think once people understand the plant and the potential, all of that stigma is overcome very, very quickly, and it's actually turned out not to be a problem at all.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it just comes down to educating people and explaining to them the difference and the potential. It'd be one thing if this was like, a product, be like, oh, it's cool to use, but it's not that great. But the real potential of it, the numbers are there.
Well, the numbers are quite staggering, actually. In fact, we learned some numbers the other day. Out of the total biomass on Earth that is available, only 3.5% is actually used for anything. So all of our food and everything represents 3.5% of the biomass on Earth. So a very, very small amount. And from that 3.5%, 70% is gone to make food, and 2.5% is gone to make plastics and chemicals, which is what we're talking about here. Now, out of that, the wealth generation is about 400 billion generated out of the food side, and about 400 billion generated out of the plastics and chemical side. So we're going from a 70% generating 400 billion to 2.5% generating the same amount of money. So the potential for biomaterials in the marketplace is absolutely enormous.
Wow.
I think once people realize that, we're going to start seeing the replacement of synthetic chemicals very quickly.
Well, and so who are the people that are going to profit from this? Because originally, the reason, at least in the States, why hemp became illegal was because the DuPonts and the Hearsts got together and decided we'd go with trees and oil, or petroleum-based products. So right now, from your point of view, who are the people? What are the obstacles that we have to get over? And
well, this is like the little guy fighting back. I mean, I read something the other day, it might have been on your website, talking about over half of the forests on Earth have been destroyed at this point, and if hemp hadn't have become made illegal, those forests would still be standing today.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really, really disturbing. Like, to think that that's true, that this industrial almost monopoly that was created by these big groups back in the 40s is responsible for cutting down half of the world's forests. Like, that's something that needs to be changed now. So I think who's going to profit from this is going to be the farmers. It's going to be SMEs. It's going to be small and medium-sized enterprises like us who can use the material. And then the consumer, who's going to get a much better product at the end of the day. And it's going to have something they can feel good about.
So I'm feeling like the big guys who have all the money to lobby against this are probably, they're a little nervous maybe.
Well, it's a strange thing because, I mean, if you look at, again, there's a big petition going around now to save the bees. And they've traced the source of the pollutant that's killing the bees down to a chemical that Bayer produces. Now, Bayer is lobbying Washington to stop the material from getting banned. But it's destroying their own food source. So it's a very, very odd thing when you have industry campaigning to keep a particular piece of legislation in place that encourages a certain type of material or product to be developed and used. But in result, you're cutting down half the world's forests to do it. It seems a very, very odd, illogical thing for such a advanced race of intellectual beings to do. It seems like a very, very
It's industrial suicide. It doesn't make any sense.
It's global suicide.
Yeah.
Right. So at this point, I mean, this is the time now. If we don't push back and we don't get this stuff changed around, in the next 10 years, we're all going to be here 50 years from now. Right, so it's very, very important that this happens now. And there's really, I mean, what that's causing is causing any fear and doubt that people have that this is necessary work. It's just evaporating. People realize this is important and we have to do this now. And so anyway.
Well, you're listening to Hemp.com with your host Josh Davis. Today we have Nathan James Armstrong. He's the director and president of Motive Industries. We'll be right back. Do you sell or manufacture a product that is made from hemp? Or do you have a product that would appeal to someone who uses hemp products? Then the opportunity is right to advertise with Hemp.com. Simply send us an email to advertise@hemp.com. We can create an ad that is right for you and put it right on our homepage. Or we can even mention you during the podcast. We offer a variety of options for whatever your needs, so reach a loyal niche market by sending us an email to advertise@hemp.com. Welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Josh Davis on Hemp.com. Today we're talking with Nathan Armstrong. He's the president of Motive Industries. And now, Motive Industries has a new car out. It's called the Kestrel. Is that on the road yet?
The prototype is currently under development now. We're going to have the first beta vehicles finished early this year. And you'll probably start seeing them around in magazines and stuff probably middle of the year. It's not going to be available for public sale for a little while. We do have to get through testing and certification with the vehicle. But that's just a matter of time and money to get through that, and then hopefully about 2013 you'll see the thing on the road.
So we talked about the outside of the car, the composite material, the biocomposite. What about the inside of the car? Tell me about what's going on in there.
Again, also largely natural fiber base. What we've been able to do is actually take the structure of the vehicle. There is an aluminum structure in the vehicle because the biocomposite isn't suitable for doing all of the work that the car needs to do as far as crash impact protection. Mm-hmm. So there is some aluminum in the framework, but in the interior, it is largely, again, bio-based material, hemp and flax. And we're probably going to use some soy foam in the seats and that kind of stuff, but essentially, again, it's mostly biomaterial as well. And as I mentioned before, we can actually injection mold the natural fiber-based plastics too. So when you injection mold the pieces in the vehicle, like any vents or small plastic pieces, will also be a bioplastic as well. So.
Now, are other car companies using this? I heard Mercedes-Benz uses hemp on some of their higher stuff.
Yep. Mercedes uses it in the door trim panels. BMW in the door trim panels in Europe. Ford has wheat straw in one of their little plastic injection molded pieces in the Flex. So it's starting to get into the mainstream again. We're starting to see some of the bigger companies move with it. But there's just not the drastic uptake that we'd like to see. Yeah. We'd like to see a much larger embracing of this technology.
And I was actually just talking about this the other day with someone. I was asking what's more important. Is it more important that the general public understands what hemp is, or is it more important that key decision makers and the creative types understand what hemp is and how to use it? What do you think about that?
Well, I think both. I think that if there was enough pressure from the public, the decision makers would have to look at it a bit closer. But ultimately, when it comes down to the laws and what we're allowed to do with the material, I don't think it's so much education. I think it is enlightenment. I think it's, what are we trying to do this for, and why are we on this planet, and what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve global dominance, and or are we trying to achieve a global community? And I think if we can get people thinking more around the global community and what's best for the planet, what's best for everybody, then it won't be such a challenge to, get these type of materials out into the market.
Mm-hmm. Does your company also work on the engine, or are you just the design for the structure?
We're just, for this vehicle, we're just the design for the body and interior and the platform.
Okay. Yeah. But will this be an electric car or a?
It's an electric car. Fundamentally, it's driven by an electric motor. It has a battery, but we also have a onboard generator system that we're developing that is going to run on natural gas. So you'll be able to run the generator to charge the battery. You'll plug it in, and you'll also be able to use the generator to run the heating and the air conditioning in the vehicle instead of using the battery. So it's a hybrid in that sense, but it's only an electric motor powering the wheels.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's not like the Volt where it's both.
And I noticed it's a small car. Is the reason for that? Are we moving towards smaller vehicles? I mean, obviously, people are still going to need to haul their stuff around. Is it just because it's easier to make a smaller car, or will we see this gradually move into like even trucks and stuff like that?
We'll definitely see it grow. I think at this point in time, we chose a small car because it's just simpler and more cost-effective to develop and build than a large vehicle platform. But once we've proven the technology in this vehicle, we're going to be rolling out at least 5 different models over the next 3 years, all based around the same technology. And they're going to range from a sports car to a pickup truck, a commercial vehicle, a 7-passenger CUV. We hope to really grow this and develop some of the vehicles with the same technology. So there really isn't a limit to scale. We've looked at shipping containers made out of the material. That's very viable. Mm-hmm. We've looked at other large-scale projects that are very viable too. So there's really no size scale challenges.
Yeah, I can think of a couple different products that would benefit just from using the biocomposite. Just in terms, because you're in Canada, you're my first Canadian guest on the show. The United States is stuck in this mindset that hemp is marijuana. The politicians won't go near it. There's some that have, I think 2 years ago, H.R. 1866 was the House bill that was introduced by Ron Paul and Barney Frank to legalize industrial hemp. It never made it out of committee. It basically failed, so it's going to have to, they're going to have to reintroduce something. It's happened many, many times. And earlier this year, there was a big vote out in California to legalize marijuana, so that was getting a lot of attention. In my opinion, this could make more money than marijuana because there's so many things that can be used for it. And from food to fiber to fuel, all that kind of stuff. Why is Canada? Why do they have the mentality that they do, that it's okay to grow this hemp? Where did that come from, and why not the U.S.?
Well, in my personal opinion, I think it's because in Canada there isn't the legacy of industry, and we don't have the same lobby groups and the same kind of heavy union groups that are trying to keep the steel mills and the smelting plants and all that stuff open, which is, in one respect, it's good that they're trying to maintain their industry and they're trying to maintain their jobs. But in another respect, just because an industry exists today, it doesn't mean that it has the right to exist. And some things just need to get out of the way and allow new technology to come through. And I think in Canada, because we don't have the same industrial legacy as you do in the States, we're able to move on this type of thing much easier. I really think in the States the pushback is more industry lobby than anything else.
I love that. I love that idea that just because something exists doesn't mean it should or it has the right to.
There was some point when the steel industry didn't exist, right? So it was born at some point.
Sure.
So, the natural fiber industry has been around a lot longer than the steel industry. Mm-hmm. The very, very first house, in fact, the very first house the settlers built up here were a sod house, where essentially they take the top layer of the grass and stack it up to make the bricks and make the house. Right. And what would happen is that the grass would continue to grow, and the roots would grow down, and the grass would grow up into the next layer and actually solidify the sod together. So that's really one of the very first uses of natural fiber here. And then back in Europe, you go back to the mud and straw house, which was the very first natural fiber composite, the very first composite material, actually. And that goes back to the very first house that was ever built. So the industrial fiber industry has been around much longer than the steel industry, if you look at it that way.
And we're not saying the steel industry should go away. I mean, obviously we need steel, but we should just open our eyes to things that, can utilize this new technology.
And as we're finding in this new economy that companies that are truly intelligent and have a bit of vision, what we're finding is that it's the steel companies that are intelligent that are investing into this type of technology because they see it coming. It's the same as the power companies that are investing into deregulated energy technology such as micro power generation because they see that that's the future of energy. So they're better off joining the club and being part of the party than trying to fight it and being pushed out at the end, because it's going to happen whether they like it or not. Mm-hmm. So,
And earlier, before we started, you were talking about some other uses of hemp, not just the food, not just the plastic, but also the construction. And I was saying I had interviewed a gentleman named Greg Faval, and he is an architect who builds houses using hemp concrete, and you had mentioned something about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, hempcrete, again, has been around for a long time. They found Mayan pyramids made out of hempcrete. They've made found Egyptian ruins made out of hempcrete. So mixing hemp and lime to make a building material has been done for a very, very long time. It's exceptionally strong. There's a 15th century bridge in France that was made with hempcrete that still stands today and is perfectly fine. So that material is quite interesting. And in fact, the hemp that's grown in Canada, most of it is gone to use towards construction projects, whether it be insulation or reinforcement for cement. But hempcrete in and of itself is kind of a different product. And there's a group in Quebec now working on a technology that will replace lime, because when you create lime, you actually burn off a lot of carbon. So the net result with hempcrete using lime is that you actually don't absorb any carbon. But if you can eliminate the lime and replace it with a different material, hempcrete actually becomes a carbon sink. So all these people working on carbon sequestration, essentially if we just switch to hempcrete, would actually absorb more carbon out of the air than we would using carbon sequestration. So it's a very interesting material. Yeah.
What is that? Do you know what it is made out of?
This replacement for lime, I don't.
Yeah.
It's a natural material, but I don't know what it is. No.
I'm going to have to get in touch with this guy and do a little interview.
Yes.
So when we and just to talk about a little bit of history, and then I'll let you go. The back in the 30s and 40s, when hemp became illegal, basically, did Canada suffer the same thing?
I don't think so. I mean, it was essentially the Hearst Empire with their Reefer Madness campaign. I think was a big part of the reason it became illegal way back in the day. And I don't think in Canada we had the same influence. Again, back then, I mean, you have to think too, Canada is still a fairly young country, and it didn't have the same weight that the U.S. had back then. It wasn't perceived as such a threat or such a even a country that's even going to come onto the international circuit as a heavy hitter. So it wasn't. I don't think it was pushed to the same degree up here. And in fact, I don't think it was ever made illegal in Canada. I might be wrong on that, but I think it's always been grown in Canada as a crop. I think since the turn of the century. So.
That's amazing. And to think, like, down in Kentucky, Kentucky was famous for its hemp fields, and farmers today whose great grandfathers grew hemp have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And again, it's a real shame because, as you mentioned earlier, all hemp is non-GMO, and you don't need to use any pesticides because there are no natural pathogens that attack the hemp plant. So there's not even a need to use any pesticides. So it's one of the cleanest crops you could possibly grow. Apart from all the other benefits on the material end. So.
And so why is it non-GMO? Is that just a push by people to grow organically? Or, I mean, at some point, is Monsanto going to say, okay, we're going to make all the hemp in the world?
I hope not. I don't know. I think at this point, again, because it's been a bit of a hot potato for people and it's not grown in the U.S., it hasn't been looked at as a target for genetic modification. And at this point, what's happening in Canada is that it's kind of past that point now. People are realizing that we don't need to go GMO to optimize the fiber or the plant growth. We can just breed, species and get the plant that way. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it's not going to go GMO. It won't ever go GMO up here. Again, there's no reason to do that. And I think, again, with all the education and outreach around GMO, and again, this thing I mentioned with the bees and with the pesticides killing the bees off, there's going to be a massive pushback to kind of get back to the land, get back to organic. Understand that organic farming principles actually produce more yield, than a crop treated with pesticides. If done smartly, So I think there's, again, that information is mainstream now. People understand the issues and understand the toxicity and all the diseases the farmers are catching from the chemicals and all that stuff is going to come around, and hopefully there'll be a big switch, in understanding about what is a good farming practice.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully there'll be a big switch just in the mentality of the way that people look at hemp and understand it and how it can be part of our culture again.
Well, it's an interesting one too, because one of the things that came to light up here was that if you have a field of industrial hemp, and then down the road there's a guy who's got a marijuana patch growing in the trees, the industrial hemp will actually breed with the marijuana and take all the THC out of it. So actually planting hemp is one of the best things they could possibly do to eliminate marijuana being grown in the U.S.
See, I tell people that all the time. I say, look, if we want to stop all the marijuana from coming up from Mexico that's being grown out there, why don't we just fly over the fields and drop hemp seeds in it?
Yes.
I mean, to
exactly
me,
right,
that's maybe
I'll
I'll just charter a plane one day and do that.
Well, the natural state of hemp is to have not THC in it. It was never meant to have THC. THC was bred into the plant once people realized its effects, I guess. And but if you do plant the two side by side, it will eliminate the THC from the marijuana crop. So that's something somebody pointed out up here, that if they did want to eliminate marijuana, that'd be the best way to do it. It would be to plant hemp. So seems like a win-win to me. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Nathan, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I thank you very much for sharing your insight and helping us with this.
Oh, for sure. Best of luck too, and let's try and get this out to as many people as we can, and make a bit of difference here. So. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of which, how can people how can they learn more about this?
Our website, motiveind.com. If you just do a search on Motive Industries, you'll find the website. There's a bunch of stories on there on the news page related to this that have come out in newspapers and publications over the last couple of years. Lots of information there. And then we have a blog as well. And on the blog is some information on natural fiber materials and the benefits. So.
Wonderful. Nathan, I want to thank you very much. Nathan was the president of Motive Industries. They invented the Kestrel car, and we were talking about biocomposites and pretty much everything related to hemp. Nathan, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Okay.
Once again, if you want to help make industrial hemp legal for our farmers in the United States to grow, visit our friends over at votehemp.com. They'll tell you how to easily send a letter to your congressman or your senator, or over to Attorney General Eric Holder, or even the President of the United States. So, this has been Josh Davis for hemp.com. Think hemp. It's about time.